Angela Mancini, welcome back to Leadership Disrupted.
Thank you.
Um, when we spoke last week, you brought up the term ESG, and you've also mentioned to me there's a real interest and a lot of discussion around diversity and inclusion, at which I'm interested to know, as a risk consultancy, why that's coming into discussion for you.
Yeah, well, traditionally, in the risk world, there's obviously the economic risk. What control risk looks at are political and regulatory risks, operational risks, integrity risks, fraud and corruption, and security risks, including cybersecurity and physical security. So those, for the last 50 years, have been the main types of risks that we're looking at, and it's been quite interesting because a lot of clients through the years have come to us and said, we want to future-proof our business. Maybe we have an acute need, but as we think more strategically, how do we think about mapping out what do we have as a business model, where in a geographic footprint, where are the risks for us, and then where are the gaps that we need to fill, where are we not mitigating risk properly because we're going to get hit either from a regulatory crackdown or a terrorist attack or the like. What's been fascinating recently is this uptick in ESG risk, which historically hasn't been at the top of any board's risk register. And so that's, again, the environmental social governance risks. And what that means in today's world, I mean, we've seen in the last couple of years movements, Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, a lot of focus on climate change and what that might do also for businesses and society. So while this started historically as potentially, something in the CSR department or something to kind of talk about on the sidelines, it's really come to the fore in terms of a key risk for business. And so what we're having clients come to us and say now is, as we're reshaping our business models and kind of how we go to market and what we take to market vis-a-vis COVID-19, how are we going to really get right the risks that we have around ESG? Some of them are saying to us, we've never even really thought about this very seriously. So how do they make sure that they really don't have things like child labor or slavery in the supply chain? How do they really make sure they're doing what they can to promote diversity and inclusion, and not just on Diversity and Inclusion Day, but like throughout the business, because that's what's going to attract talent and retain talent. And that's what's going to really make or break your reputation in the market. And we've seen some high profile companies that have gotten this wrong. And man, the shareholder value drops quickly when you don't get that right in this market.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I hadn't realised that. I know diversity and inclusion, for example, is right at the top of the agenda for our organisation. But I hadn't realised that boards would be looking at not getting that right as such a big risk. I suppose I'm just and right in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis, that stayed right up there. That's fascinating. It's encouraging, by the way. What other items would still be right up at the top of the agenda? I mean, maybe environmental sustainability. That was before COVID-19. That was on the news all day, every day, and suddenly we stopped hearing about that as much and focused on COVID-19. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think so definitely, we've all kind of learned the lesson of pandemics can happen. We actually had a pandemic risk on our 2019 risk map control risk. We did it, I guess, a year or two early. But the environmental one, you're exactly right. That's one that was on the board agenda about a year or so ago, was really getting much more airtime, and Greta Thunberg and kind of the agreements that were happening across Europe and the like. And that did absolutely drop off with COVID-19 because everyone's been so focused on pandemic issues. Having said that, one of the key risks we're advising to boards now is obviously that hasn't gone away. And so while there's definitely, activist interest in that area and, the reputational risk if you don't get it right and the like of it, there are real concrete business financial risk issues to you if you're not planning for that now. So whether that's the movement of your people, whether that's your supply chains, I mean, if we expect some big weather event to happen this year or to get worse as the years go by, we're already starting to see some weather events in the States this year already, that's going to have a massive impact. And the challenge is that's going to come right when crisis management teams are tired. They're still working on COVID-19 issues. They're still trying to work through what's that operational, organizational resilience in the business. How do they, kind of recover from COVID-19? So we do see environmental risk as one that's kind of right there and not going away. And I think the broader issue is also how do boards think about ensuring their leadership teams are building up that organizational resilience, because that's been an area that a lot of people have cut corners on, try to save some money, have some efficiencies in the last several years, and that's really bitten them.
Yeah. I just want to pick up on something you said there. On your risk map for 2019, you had a pandemic. It didn't, I suppose it started in 2019, right at the end. But from what point were you talking to organizations about this potential for pandemic coming, and were people listening? Did they start to prepare for that?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. The answer is no. I think people were boards and executive leadership, and I guess rightly so, tend to be most focused on the risks that they're seeing in the newspapers. In the last couple of years, that's all been around U.S.-China trade war and geopolitical issues. It's been around environmental issues. And so while there were people talking about, there could be a pandemic, and definitely I think it was on everyone's risk register, but it's way down the list. You're thinking, we have enough headaches to deal with as it is today. Let's not really start worrying about things that might not happen anytime soon. And then sure enough, we do see it happen. I think businesses in Asia were further ahead because they dealt with SARS, whereas the businesses in Europe and the States didn't have to deal with that. But I think the challenge is just, as an organization, as we say in the risk business, you need an all hazards approach. It doesn't matter what the next shock is going to be. It could be a terrorist attack. It could be a climate issue. The issue is how you as an organization have built up resiliency, how you're ready to handle those, how you're structured, who's the team that's doing that, how can you bounce back, even if you're getting shocks to the business. And you may have more than one big one in a year, and that's what we're watching for now.
Yeah. Every time we see inflection points in the market, there's a whole new set of buzzwords, and if anybody says pivot to me one more time, I want to slit my wrists. But the reality is that organisations have had to change very quickly, and what you've just discussed is sometimes if things are not front of mind, if they're not there about to hit us, we're not ready to take that on. But do you think that the general psyche of executives and boards will change because of COVID-19 in terms of how they assess future risks to their organizations?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I'd say human nature, unfortunately, isn't to have great change, especially once you're maybe older than 20 or 25. But I do think, to answer your question, I do think they're going to have some change, both from like a personal leadership perspective and also how organizations as a team think about risk, because there's just no room for error anymore. I mean, budgets are tight. The economy doesn't look good in many markets. There's just not a lot of room for error to get it wrong. And companies that do get it wrong, that are kind of asleep at the wheel going forward, the market's going to be really unforgiving for that. You just can't ignore some of these big potential shocks to the business anymore.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's a real wake-up call. I'd love to pick on that subject with you next time we speak. But thank you for your time today, Angela.
Great, thank you so much.